you, Theodora, for having me on your show. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Great. So would you like to tell us about the conference and who will be presenting? I can say that when I looked at all of the speakers, I was so impressed. I felt like it was just covering almost all of the issues related to electromagnetic radiation in health.
I'd love to talk about the conference. The EMF Medical Conference, the title of it is Preventing, Diagnosing, and Treating EMF-Associated Illness. This conference is scheduled to be held virtually on January 28th, running for 4 days, January 28th to 31, 2021. And that's in about 41 days from today. So time is approaching. And we've been working on planning for this conference for about 14 months. What happened was Theodora and I and many others were speakers at a conference held in Scotts Valley, California in September 2019. At that conference, there were scientists and medical doctors there from all over the world. And those who attended in person also came from within the US, Canada, and other nations. There were only over 350 people there. It was a great conference. We all made good connections. And we said at the end, we need to do this again. We need to keep this movement going. So with the advice of the organizers of that conference, which was held in honor of Dr. William Ray, who founded the Environmental Health Center in Dallas and who was a pioneer in the field of environmental medicine in this country, we started planning this one, and we've been pushing on it ever since. I'd like to tell you a little about the program and what our overall goals are. We know that doctors don't often understand when people come in complaining about symptoms related to electricity or wireless technologies, or in fact, other environmental sources like chemicals in the environment, and fungus, mold, and so forth. Many doctors, well, they weren't trained for this in medical school. They didn't necessarily know how to recognize this. And that is our intention, is to continue the conversation started at the 2019 conference by bringing together doctors who specialize in environmental and integrative medicine, who understand how the environment can be the cause of disease and illness, and work with their patients, not only to heal them, but to help them understand how they can protect themselves from exposure to these sources in the environment. And so our goal is to train and educate people who come and to the conference. And we're primarily focusing this conference on health practitioners, and we're offering 16 and a half continuing medical education units, but everyone is welcome to attend. It's just that our programming will be designed for them, and we will give them some special space so they can interact directly with the speakers on panels. Since we're expecting over 1,000 people, we cannot possibly have panel discussions with people raising their hands, 1,000 people raising their hands. So we're really going to give the CME accredited CME speakers who's registered for that priority so they can ask the questions. Now the conference is going to have 4 components to it. It's going to start out focusing on the science. What is the scientific evidence that demonstrates harm to man and to nature from sources in the environment? And that includes sources from electricity and from wireless technologies. We're going to have the primary experts on this field who have been researching this area, particularly Fiorella Belpogi, who's the science director of the Ramazzini Institute in Italy, and Ronald Melnick, who designed and managed for many years the National Toxicology Program's assessment of radiofrequency radiation. Both of these studies were long-term clinical lab studies done on rats and mice that were published in 2018. Both of these studies have really moved this issue forward because it helps to now answer the questions about whether or not EMF causes cancer, because in fact, their studies showed that there's clear evidence of cancer for rats and mice, especially for male rats. But they're going to be there to present their science. And in addition, in that component, we're going to have Dr. Henry Lai, who is the first scientist to identify DNA damage in animals in clinical studies. Dr. Deborah Davis, who will talk about the problems, the science that shows reproductive and infertility problems due to EMF exposure, and Igor Yakomenko, who's quite well known. He is in the Ukraine, and he'll be discussing about the phenomenon of oxidative stress, which is a known biological marker of EMF exposure. And he describes how that chemical compound works in the body, because we are biochemical entities, beings, and EMF interacts with us whether from an artificial source or a natural source, because we are electromagnetic beings. So the next component of the conference will be on the medical doctors and the other doctors who are presenting, including MDs and naturopaths. And they will talk about what they do in their practices to heal patients who come to them who are have some type of electromagnetic illness known as electrohypersensitivity or microwave radiation illness, radio wave illness. There's a number of terms that are used on this, but when people show up in those practices, these doctors recognize it and they have specific ways of treating it, and they're going to talk about what they do. And we have several doctors who are going to present, including Dr. Erica Mallory Blythe from England, who has a group called FIRE, a physicians group who is looking after the whole issue of the source of the problem of EMF, the medical diagnostic and treatment practices they recommend and use in their practices, as well as advocating for policy change to bring about greater health protection. Dr. Mallory Blythe is a medical doctor. In addition, Dr. Elizabeth Seymour will be speaking. She's the medical director of the Environmental Health Center that Dr. Ray founded in Plano or Dallas, Texas. And she will be on this show in about 20 minutes to talk about what she does to treat her patients. There are a number of other doctors who are going to be speaking. And then we have Dr. Anthony Miller, who has been a consultant at the World Health Organization and is a cancer epidemiologist. He'll be speaking, he's in Canada. And finally, I'll just mention, we're going to have EMF assessment professionals there to talk about how to use an EMF meter and how to mitigate against harmful EMF exposure conditions by using physical shielding materials, and train how to use a meter and know how to advise your patients, and particularly understand that as a role model, if you can overcome your own dam of denial about whether this technology is harmful or not and model behavior to your patients by using landlines, turning off Wi-Fi at night, and not choosing to live by a cell tower, you can go a long way in helping your patients.